Hey there, it's Chris. Welcome back to the Spartan Ultra training program that I've been going on, where nature is kind of forcing its hand on this session, because if you live anywhere between, say, New England and down to Texas, you probably notice this tiny little storms been coming through, and yeah, we're getting all this snow, we're getting all this cold, and basically for like the next 3 weeks, it is going to be bone-chilling cold outside. So this session is all going to be about how do we train in this kind of cold weather? How do we go running out when temperatures are like 20 degrees below what we're used to things being? And just to kind of throw out some numbers to kind of get an idea of what we're dealing with here. If we just say if our starting temperature is say 30 degrees and we have 15-mile-an-hour winds with like gusts like up to 24 mile an hour, and let's say I'm doing a zone 2 run, we're doing a 10-minute mile, it's going to be a 6 mile per hour pace I'm running. I'm actually getting a little faster than that now, which is awesome. But in general, as a rough generality, our real feel, our wind chill factor on this is going to be roughly your straight temperature minus your wind chill, or minus your wind speed, minus the pace you're running if you're running into the wind. So half of your run is going to wind up being this temperature here. So in this example, our real feel is going to wind up being, it might be 30 degrees outside. When we're running into the wind, it's going to feel like 9. Or, considering it's going to hit gusty winds, if we're running into the wind gusts and whatnot here, it's actually going to be 0. So there's going to be a temperature difference of like 30 degrees in this situation. So that's kind of what we're dealing with when we're dealing with, I need to close some things out on here, when we're kind of dealing with this stuff here. That's what our cold is going to wind up being. And there are really 2 factors we're going to take into account when doing this. I'm going to take into account in this whole session. That's going to be, one is going to be on apparel, and the other one is going to be on our pre-planning and our workouts, and how do we actually do them safe. So kind of the least important of the 2 actually is going to wind up being our apparel. So let's just start with that real quick. So starting from kind of the bottom up, when I'm going out and doing these runs kind of out here, there are really 2 methods I can use for the legs to keep them warm. We have one, which is like our standard sweatpants. They can kind of get the job done. Or we can go more kind of the leggings on the side. And of the 2, I tend to prefer the leggings over the sweatpants now. I used to be big on the sweatpants, that has since changed. Anything that can kind of stay tighter to your body, this stays like tighter to the legs, like tighter to the arms, whatever you're doing, that tends to keep the heat more trapped closer to your body. And I have never had an issue yet wearing these of being cold outside during that, or during any of these runs. On the upper body side of things, you might disagree with one of the choices I'm going to have on here, but my base layer when it gets in these stupid cold kind of days is always going to be the compression shirt. I'm always going to have a compression shirt on here. I want to keep this thing, again, tight to the body. It's going to hold the warmth right in your body. These things are super warm. You don't have one of these, they're fantastic to have. That said, on top of that, I'm going to use another thermal layer. It's not super thick, but this is another thermal layer that's going to hold, or kind of help keep the heat now between this and the other one with skin tights. That's going to be really good at holding stuff in. And the third layer, you might disagree with me on this one, but I will also have another kind of, it's a little bit looser, but another kind of layer on top of that, but it's just a standard fabric. And you're probably thinking that rather than a third layer of this, you'd probably have more like a solid shell kind of on top, something more like the raincoat or windbreaker or something. I find in the cold, I actually don't like having a shell kind of layer on top of that, because these don't breathe. It will block the cold, it will block like the wind and all that really great. However, if you're doing like a zone 2 run or something nice and easy, this can be really great. If you want to actually put speed into your workout, and I'll get into how to do that safely in the next part, but if you're going to add speed elements, you might start sweating. And even though it's really cold out, if you're going with the wind, again, it's going to be a 30-degree difference between going one direction versus another. If you're going speed with the wind, you may still wind up sweating in the end. And if you do that, this won't let the perspiration stuff get out, and now you're going to be wet. You're going to come back into the wind at some point, and you're actually going to wind up being colder than you were before. So I generally don't use an outer shell when I do these really, really cold runs, just because if you do wind up perspiring, you get yourself into more trouble than you'd otherwise be in. But again, if you're doing just a slow run like a zone 2 or something, that might be really great to use, but it is going to be very situational on when that can be done. That said, because everything is at night, like I said, I am usually always using kind of bright colors on that. And at the same time, I'm definitely using reflective stuff and all that, because even with a bright color, reflective things, headlight on, whole 9 yards, cars still have a way of not seeing you coming out of like developments and stuff. I don't get it. I've almost been hit now, not hit, but had people second guess themselves coming out of turns about 3 or 4 times this season so far. Just like, I'm like, I can't make myself any more visible. But on top of that, have a nice pair of gloves. These are like really nice warm kind of things there. You can always take them on and off as need be. And when we start getting into single digit temperatures and whatnot, I do use a ski mask here for running in. Now, this is going to look really bad when I take this off because my hair is going to go everywhere, but just as the idea. Whoop. So if I'm running into the wind, again, if we're running into a wind, this is going to be really great for keeping like the nose and the mouth nice and kind of covered up. You're warmer. This is awesome. However, it doesn't breathe particularly well. You can inhale perfectly fine. There are enough holes in here, there's stuff under the nose. You can get air in without any issue. The problem is when you try to exhale, all the breath doesn't get out of the holes, so you wind up rebreathing some of that air that you've been trying to breathe out. So it's a lot harder to get the oxygen intake that you want to get. So throughout the run, as I'm going to go over the next session, you're always going to be constantly kind of pulling this down so you can breathe during some parts and bringing it back up. So this doesn't stay as a static element on you. This is going to be moving as you go in and out to judge whether you need to value warmth or whether you need to value breathing more. It also fogs up glasses if you wear glasses, so awesome on that too. But yeah, so this is really, really great at the really, really cold temperatures. However, it does come with a price, and taking it off will always do that with the hair. It is what it is. Anyway, that's kind of what I wear when I go out on these things. That said, or as I said, first thing, that's kind of the least important of the 2 factors we're going from. What's actually what's more important is the pre-planning that goes on into these workouts, because you can either get yourself into a lot of trouble or you can save a lot of hassle depending where you go. Now, I'm going to be turning the webcam off real quick, but this week was, if you've been following along my schedule, this was the 10-miler I wanted to get in this week, and I did. So during the week, the temperatures weren't terrible. They were getting down pretty cold. They weren't terrible. This weekend, the bottom has dropped out, and we're actually looking at negative temperatures before even getting into wind chills. So I did my 10-mile run on Friday night after work. And to give an idea of what I was doing, when I originally wanted to do this 10-mile distance run, I had, here we go. All right, so now we're turning this off. I had originally planned a route that looks something like this. I have a biking, I was actually going to use my sprint biking route that I use, which is really good for getting kind of time trials and stuff when I'm, biking, because it's a little over 10 miles and it's perfect for this kind of run. But what I wound up actually using when I realized what this was going to entail and the temperatures involved was to scale. That was my actual route to do this 10-mile run. And a lot of the reason for that was because we had 17-mile-an-hour winds coming out in that direction. Now, this is still better than if I'd gone out on Saturday to do this workout, because Saturday was even worse. But yeah, this is what we had to kind of deal with. So once again, our real feel is going to be the actual temperature minus the wind speed, minus what I was doing running into the wind. And what that wound up being in reality on this run was on average, at the beginning of the run it was warmer, at the end it was cooler. It was 28 degrees, so minus the 17. And I did a 10-minute mile zone 2 run at the end. I did my first 4 miles fast, then I finished with a 10K of the 10-minute mile. So that wound up dropping the temperature running into the wind to about 5 degrees. And it was gusty, so it was actually negative temperatures. We took into account the gusts. It was probably like -2 to -5 somewhere if we take into account the gusts that went in. So if I had taken my original route that I had planned on doing, you can see in the bottom there, that would have wound up being about a 20-minute stretch of heading straight into that wind. There's one little zig, but it would have been like 20 minutes straight going straight into that wind. And that, my face, even with the mask on, my eyes and whatnot will have just frozen. Which is also why I don't worry too much about having the outer shell when running. I can use the fabric, because by the time that outer shell comes into play, my face is already completely frozen altogether anyway. So instead of laying out a route where I'm running straight back into that kind of wind, what I wound up doing was setting a route back. I did my fast 4 miles kind of with the wind, ran out to the farthest point possible first, and as I came back into the wind to get back to my starting point, I'd set a route where rather than going back, kind of like if you've ever gone sailing, you have to sail into the wind. You know you can't go straight in, you have to kind of tack back and forth. I set a route where I might need to run back like a quarter mile, half mile to the wind, and then I tack north or south or something for a loop to kind of warm up. Then I come back into the wind a little bit, then I go another direction, another perpendicular direction to this. So I kept kind of tacking. I set a route where I was tacking back and forth various ways, so I wouldn't have to run any extended period into the wind to do this. And so what that meant with the mask is when I was wearing this guy here, was as I was going into the wind, I would pull the mask up so the nose would be covered, nose and mouth would be covered. It would be harder to breathe, but I'd cover the nose and mouth. And then as I tacked away from the wind, I'd pull that down, I'd get my fresh air, I'd warm up back up again, and then I'd kind of rinse and repeat. So you're always kind of doing this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth to get that working. So I can see I've already clicked on the image I didn't mean to click on yet on the side, but that's really the big part. Is if you want like the little additional tips to kind of go with this is, one more thing I notice is you look out for black ice. Black ice is always going to be one of those issues. It's going to be most prominent kind of right after snow, after the plows have kind of gone through, and kind of before the stuff is fully melted off the sides of the roads. So after a snowfall, like we have the one coming up right now, it's going to be like the biggest chance of seeing the black ice on the side. But usually the chances diminish as time goes on, as the roadways kind of melt stuff off. So that will go away in time, but just be mindful of that. It does exist. In general, this isn't the time to be a hero. Keep your runs shorter. You don't need to go out and do these giant things. Yes, I just did my big one. This coming week, I'll be honest, I didn't get my 26 miles in this week. I did my bigger of the runs. I did my 5-milers. I did my 10-miler. I didn't do the recovery runs this week, so I only wound up with about 20 miles in the end. But I got the big ones in. Next week's going to wind up being even shorter. Next week is going to be the big freeze, and I don't have a big run at the end coming up. So even if I get like 15 miles, that's going to be fine for total miles. I'm not going to be pushing this one. There's a reason we gave ourselves 21 weeks to do this. It's winter. We know these types of weeks are going to come up where it's going to get stupid cold. So we can bank this week in as kind of one of those, okay, it happens. We're going to do shorter runs. I'm not going to risk things. I'm not going to get myself in trouble doing this. But if we do go out and do things and do our runs, if I want to do a longer one, I'm going to keep it more local. I'm not going to do these giant out and back kind of things. I'm going to stay kind of in more local loops. If something goes wrong, I can always duck back to my starting point and get to a safe location. I'm not going to do a big out and back, because if you come back, it's going to be problems. If you have to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes facing these types of winds, it's going to be horrendous. So directionality is going to be a lot of loop type things, a lot of shorter loop type things. And also, we want to stay hydrated during this. Probably want to stay more hydrated than we ordinarily would be during this. So more than ever, I'm going to be using this guy. Because again, the air we're going to be breathing is going to be super, not just super cold, it is going to be super dry. And we're going to be sucking all that into our lungs. So we want to be able to keep basically some moisture, some liquid and stuff on us. The mask will help with that. This will hold the moisture in. As you try to exhale, this will hold some of that moisture in there to make life easier. But also we're going to be using some of this to help counteract some of that moisture issue that we have. And at the same time, if nothing else, and above all else, if you're dealing with temperatures you've never had to deal with before, just listen to your body. If your body, for whatever reason, you can be a quarter mile in, you can be like 5 miles in. It doesn't matter. If your body feels like something is off, this isn't working, you just don't feel right, just stop. Just be safe. You don't need to be a hero. You can just come back. I've gone out for runs before and stopped, like, I literally get to like a tenth of a mile, a quarter mile out, and I realize this just isn't right. This isn't going to work. And I just walked right back. I stopped there. I jogged back real quick, and no. So again, we've banked these miles. We've come like roughly 2 months into this. We have banked a lot of those miles. It is okay if we have a down week. It's fine. This isn't the time to be a hero. But we can do this safely. It just, be mindful of what you do when you go out during these. It can be done, but just be safe, be smart, dress appropriately, pre-plan your routes, and you can get this done. And hopefully next week we'll get into some more exciting stuff. I keep saying I want to get into these trail runs. Trail runs are, who knows if you're going to get a trail run in this year. So far this year has been terrible for getting to that. So eventually we'll get there, but it's still going to be some time. And hopefully next week we have some more fun stuff to talk about and not just like a safety video that I'm doing here. But until then, and until that next time comes, good luck and enjoy.